That's not the music I sent you.
No,
There we go.
he never quite gets that though. Good morning, everybody. If you're seeing this right now, it is November 3rd, Wednesday, the first Wednesday of the month, and we have a special guest, a recurring guest on, and we're going to talk about a very important subject. And
But first, how do you like those elections last night? Boy,
Oh,
those returns
yes.
surprising. Oh,
Yeah. That threw me off there, Dr. B. Yes, Jenny, thank you. Thank you, Jenny. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Pan Dulce. I'm Christian Cano, one of your co-hosts, along with Jenny-Jaymes Gunn, Barb Bacon, Mama Ruth, who I'm not sure if she's joining us this morning, and then also Stephen DeFiore, who we hope we'll see before the year ends. He's kind of vanished, but I'm sure he's just incredibly busy. So with that said, today is November 3rd, as Jenny mentioned. It's the first Wednesday of the month. Today is a very important topic, and we want to thank Dr. Bumfalk for doing this. Dr. Bumfalk, I don't know if you saw last week's show, but the entire show I kept calling you Dr. Bumfelt.
I've heard worse.
That's why I call you Dr. B, because I was like, it's not his name.
Yeah.
Anyway,
all right. Whatever.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Are you okay with Dr. B?
Dr.
Absolutely. Well, that beats most of the alternatives.
Yeah, that's well. All right. As we always do in Coffee and Pan Dulce, let's go around your Brady Bunch screen. It allows me to normally share us on our social media platforms. Full disclosure, we're actually taping the show the night before, so that's why what Dr. B said was a little humorous, because I'm actually watching.
I have no idea.
Yeah, so we have no idea. We do know that the World Series, the Astros and the Braves are tied 1-1, right, Barb?
1-1, right?
So,
yep.
So we will know tomorrow. When you see this, you'll know what the score is. All right, let's go around the Brady Bunch screen. Let's go Barb, Dr. B, and Jenny, if you don't mind.
I'm Barb Bacon. I'm a community advocate here in South Charlotte. Good news this week. My boyfriend was exposed to COVID, and so we quarantined for 5 days. We both had COVID tests this morning. We're both negative. If either one of us develops symptoms, even in the next 3 days, they want us to go back and have a PCR test. But talk about relief. So I don't care what else happens. I'm just happy. So.
Great. I'm George Bumfalk. I'm a retired physician. My big advocacy is primarily Medicare for all, which we're not getting solved at all in this Build Back Better package. So the fight goes on. My other advocacy interest is Black Lives Matter and racial justice. So we'll be talking about some of that this morning.
Good morning, everybody. I am Jenny-Jaymes Gunn. I am an LGBT advocate and possibly an activist. After last week's show, I'm not sure which I am. I think I flutter between both. I work for a lot of other causes, especially healthcare for all and Medicare for all. I believe it's been past time. It should be a no-brainer, especially during a pandemic. That should have been, I don't know, it should have been passed before some of those corporate incentives were passed, I think, to prepare us for the infrastructure of pivoting during a major worldwide crisis that's killed over 5 million people. So it's one of those things that I think is very important, and I think Black Lives Matter should always be on the top of our the forefront of our thoughts, and reversing and changing how we relate as a society. And it's also Day of the Dead.
That's right.
And I posted a thing on my Facebook, and they explained kind of the brief history of it and how it really originated with the Toltecs and the Mayas, and it really wasn't a Spanish holiday, but it got co-opted and colonized by the Catholic Church and got incorporated, and now has evolved in kind of a worldwide, non-specific deal, and to just honor the dead and be closer to them during the 1st and the 2nd of November now.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Jenny. Yeah, thank you for, and we also, thank you, Jenny, we also put that on the, it was a wonderful thing you posted on our Coffee and Pan Dulce page as well. So thank you so much. I'm Christian Cano, one of your other co-hosts. My buttons are, I'll just, that one there, Medicare for all, healthcare for all, Moms in Action, Gun Sense legislation. And in my heart, always a button for Joe Oldham, who was a young man who passed away last year, who was on our show this time last year, a young man. So we want to talk about 3 quick topics, and we want to do them very quickly so we can spend the rest of our time on our main topic. Our main topic is what's an anti-racist? This is something that Dr. B has been referring to almost all year. I believe he read a book, and we will have him talk about that and explain. We were supposed to have Reverend Rodney Sadler from Charlotte also joining us, and he's also with McMinistries. He was going to share with us some of the things they're doing, and also Annette Albright, and they may be joining us as the show goes on. Maybe they got the time zones confused. So with that said, let's salute to our neighbors. I have to full disclosure, since we're taping this Tuesday night, this is actually my margarita, my Taco Tuesday margarita. So in my,
This is my chamomile tea.
Is that from Manolo's? Does Manolo's do margaritas?
Hey, he'd make a killing doing that. And also, speaking of Manolo's, we want to thank our producer, sponsor, and supplier, Manolo's
Getting the
Bakery.
pig this week?
I ate that. So
Oh.
yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I ate it. All right. So Manolo's Bakery in Central Avenue. Please support your Black and brown business, small businesses during this global pandemic. Manolo's Bakery here in Charlotte, North Carolina, immigrant owned, made in America by immigrant hands. So please visit and support Manolo's endeavors. He's got several endeavors. So with that said, the 3 quick topics. Anybody want to comment on the Virginia race, the NYPD? They were required to take mandatory vaccines that were supposed to be done by Friday. And yeah, I don't know if y'all read about that, but apparently the union chief for the NYPD had said that 10,000 police were going to be off the force. Turns out only 34 of them. So anyway, you want to comment on that?
Yeah.
Yes. And so that was like the big case. And then here in Charlotte, North Carolina, our mayor, there she is with her head on Hugh McCall's. Anyway, here in North Carolina, corporate leaders announced $250 million investment in racial equality. So anybody want to comment on those in 30 seconds or less? Who wants to go first?
I'll rifle through them real quick.
All right, go ahead.
What we knew that those NYPD officers were not going to quit, just like there wasn't any mass quitting at the hospitals here in Charlotte. Nobody's going to leave qualified immunity, a cake job, a union job,
Pension.
and retirement. And the 34 that quit, they were already close to retirement anyway, and they were probably definitely the trash takes itself out in COVID. So we'll leave it at that. Deuces. But then also too, the governor's race. If the Democrat does lose, he's a retread candidate that was a piss poor candidate, and we're gonna have to run better candidates if we want to win taxes in Florida.
Darn it, Jenny, you stole mine. Go ahead. All right.
and the $250 million, not enough, but at least it's a start.
Excellent. All right, Barb, you want to go next? Then we'll do the Dr. B.
Not surprised about New York, and family comments were, yeah, wait till their wives find out. They'll all go back to work and give vaccines. So, and you know what? It's the truth. You did what?
Exactly.
I forgot the second topic. But
the Virginia race and then the Charlotte.
Virginia race. I really don't know too much about either one of them, but the guy that Trump supported hasn't let him come to Virginia. I'm tired of this, and I just don't want to talk about it. Tired of politics, and just saw the thing about Mayor Lyle, and I'm like, whatever. So I'm not a big fan. So hopefully the money does some good.
Yeah, excellent. All right, and Dr. B, do you want to comment on any of those?
Yeah, I really don't know much about the corporate thing, except like Jenny said, I understand it's kind of, almost a drop in the bucket. As for the police thing, I'm bothered that some judge evidently did block the mandate in Chicago, like Family Days. So, it goes on as we scrunch our way towards any kind of progress. So, I don't know.
Virginia race or you want to, I mean,
Nah.
yes, it's literally, All right,
Yeah.
well, excellent. Okay, well, me really quickly, Virginia race, I was going to say exactly what Jenny said. Darn you, Jenny. If McAuliffe loses, we need to run a better candidate. He was like, he used to be governor, and there was no excitement for the base to come out. But we'll see. It's anyway. NYPD. I was following that all week long, and I heard the union president did the press conference that 10,000 police are not going to show up to work, and it's going to destroy the crime and whatever. And then after it was all done, 34. He was trying to scare people. He was trying to scare citizens into going, oh my God, no police. But you guys said everything. And the $250 million thing, I think it's a wonderful thing. I don't know. I just think if they can pull together $250 million from corporate partners here in Charlotte, then maybe we should tax them so that way we can actually have things that our poor neighbors need. And so, because they obviously have $250 million. So anyway, that was just my 2 cents. All right. Yeah, no, tax is not a great idea. Okay, with that said, what's an anti-racist? Let's have Dr. B start. And I know, Dr. B, that you had read this book. This is how to be an anti-racist. And you want to tell us about that, and maybe that can start our conversation.
Yeah, sure. I have read more than one book, actually, but this one about racism.
Okay.
Is the topic of the times. But this is a very good one. It's not an easy book. It's rather challenging. Dr. Kendi is a professor, I think, at Howard University. I should have checked that. It's a little bit of a different slant on a lot of these approaches to racism and white fragility and white supremacy and whatnot. But I commend it to everyone, but don't expect to be entertained. Expect to kind of have to concentrate and work on it. But it really gave me some, I think, very great eye-opening perspectives on things. And Dr. Kendi is being vilified right now all around the country for speaking truth to power. And the right is holding him up as, oh, he's anti-American. He wants kids in America to hate each other and all this stuff. And that's just couldn't be farther from the truth. So anyway, that's the book that with that title brought up the context of, you can say, well, I'm not a racist, but in order to really accomplish anything, you need to be an anti-racist. And so what comes through is that, most of us have opinions about things, but most of us don't have strong opinions about several important things. It's like, if somebody were to ask you, should we colonize Mars? I don't care. Should we spend more money on arts and should Puerto Rico be a state? You might have an opinion, but not a very strong. But then a lot of things almost all of us have profoundly strong opinions on. Same-sex marriage. You remember what a battle that was. Should abortion be legal? I mean, talk about emotions. And Trump, I think we all have pretty powerful emotional attitudes about him. And then racism. And most people are very much pro or anti those types of issues. So racism, of course, is one of the most emotional. I mean, if you want to get somebody's hackles up, insinuate that they're a racist. I mean, but what the book says is that if you're not actively against racism, then on some level, whether you're active or whether you're just kind of quietly complicit, then by definition, you're a racist, whether you realize and admit it or own it or not. So, you're either racist or anti-racist. It's kind of a two sides of a coin type of thing. It's hard to be in between and just sit back and say you're neither, because you're participating in it if you're not actively kind of working against it. So what is an anti-racist? An anti-racist is somebody who is actively taking a position against policies and practices and attitudes that either produce or sustain racial inequality or suggest that one racial group is inferior, superior to any other one. And it seems that, as he says, the heartbeat of racism is denial, didn't we all? And that the heart of anti-racism is confession. You have to realize it, that you've played some, perhaps tiny, but nonetheless role in this systemic racism that we're all involved in. And so the key to being an anti-racist is you have to stop denying it. Stop claiming that you're not a racist, because on some level we all are. And it's not your fault that you're racist. You were raised in we were all raised in a racist nation here in the United States. But it is your fault if you don't own that and become an anti-racist. So I guess that's the quickest way to say kind of what an anti-racist is.
And essentially, in physics, you're either going backwards or forwards. There's nothing stands still. There's nothing to just, in the universe, everything's in motion one way or the other. And so, right, the major issues, well, all issues is either progressing or regressing. And we have to really look at a lot of these things and say, the conservatives are really not conservatives per se. They're really more like regressives. They're wanting us to go back to 1955 or 1855 in many cases. And a progressive is pushing the other direction. And so you got two opposing forces. And depending on who you are, that makes you comfortable or uncomfortable by acknowledging that. And with racism, I believe what you're really saying is it's a lot like the steps you go to get dry off alcohol. I mean, the first thing is admitting you have a problem, and then taking the steps to make amends, make the apologies, work on it. It's a daily battle, because I can say without a shadow of doubt, especially my mom's parents and my maternal grandfather was extremely anti-Black. He loathed Black people and didn't want anything to do with him, didn't like him in his business. And I grew up around that, even though I grew up in big cities. And what was strange is he was mostly Native American. and so he was predominantly a person of color that didn't like another group of people of color. And so having that influence, even though it did not affect me in certain ways, it did, would you get used to that being around, and you just accept it the way it is, you become an enabler.
Sure.
And I think that therein lies the issue, is that we have too many people that just say, that's just the way it is. That's just the way.
Exactly.
That we have to just accept it. That's just part of life. And you don't really have to accept it. Would that be that's essentially what you're saying, Dr. B, or what the book was said as well. Would that be more or less the gist? Is that we've accepted it too long, and to be an anti-racist, we can't accept it for ourselves, and we have to have higher standards for our society.
Good question.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, I grew up in Illinois and lily white Illinois, Northwest near Wisconsin. I never saw a Black person until I was in my teens, and it was in the rich section of town, and they would take the train in from Chicago and get picked up or take a taxi and go and clean people's houses. I never saw one before. I never knew anything about them one way or the other, but I heard all these derogatory comments from my uncles primarily. God knows in those days, women didn't have too much to say or couldn't say it. And I really didn't know anything about it. So then to be in high school and getting on a bus and going to other teams and other towns, and oh my God, you go to this town and there's like 50% Black people. And I was like, oh, I didn't have any emotion one way or the other, because I always decided for myself. I was going to make up my own mind. I wasn't going to I thought my family was too opinionated, even though I'm opinionated too, but I wanted to make up my own mind.
Sure. So my question to, yeah, go ahead.
I just, until our family had people bringing Black people in for family function and things, we never ever experienced that. Now I have a niece who's had 2 children by a Black man, and everybody's had to clean up their act. And you can tell for some of them it's forced, but fortunately, my brother, that's only a year and a half younger than I am, really changed his mind for the sake of his grandchildren. I was shocked. And I can't say that some of the rest of the family is so forgiving, but it is what it is. And now I have a niece and a nephew, and that's the way it is. And all those things are forbidden, but I don't know. It's difficult, and I don't know what the answer is, but for my family, that wasn't a very pleasant solution, but they're welcome in our family, and I love them both to death because they're just as sweet as can be. But what are you gonna do? It's family, right?
Well, I've always felt like the only people who can fix racism and bigotry are racists and bigots. So as I have lived in Charlotte, Jenny and I have had these conversations a lot, not just about this, but just about issues in general. It always was disturbing to me to see our Black and brown neighbors really having to sit in front of white churches talking about racism and so forth, when actually they're not the problem. The problem are the people that are the racists and the bigots. They're the ones that should be sitting in front of the Black churches trying to understand why they, have, I don't know. I mean, does that resonate to anyone? I mean, I
agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it speaks to, this is kind of what Kendi talks about in his book. He says, racism to a degree is, these insults and all this demeaning another group. But the reason behind that is power. And so, if white people are in power, and if they are fearful of losing any sense of power by giving up their racist policies, well, that's the problem. So don't expect to kind of find them in front. The trick is to, one of the things that was the biggest takeaway for me from Kenny's book, you said, we can't sit here and go around to all our racist friends, neighbors, relatives, and everybody, and try to persuade them, try to show them the light and make them woke and, kind of convince them. He says the only way because they're never going to willingly kind of give it up. And he said probably the only way forward is to enact non or anti-racist policies and just kind of tell people, get used to it. Like the country did not vote on same-sex marriage, did we? We didn't. The country did not vote on abortion. Decisions were made, which made them law, and people kind of on same-sex marriage largely have gotten used to it. Abortion, we're still fighting over. But he says first you need to kind of change the policy and just kind of let people catch up to it, and that's about the only way we're going to go. So. But there's a lot that people can do as anti-racist, and we can talk about that. But
Jenny talks about that a lot. As a matter of fact, she posted something earlier today that I thought was brilliant. It was a TikTok influencer or social media influencer that was. You want to explain that, Jen? I mean, I thought that was like the best way to explain it.
I mean, she's somebody that I follow, and I follow a couple of people. I follow the Jolly Ginger, and I follow she calls her handles the Crazy Runner Mom, and she talks about racism and bigotry and anti-vax stuff, and they're all kind of related because they all boils down to the people that have the power feel threatened when you start to say, we need to do restorative justice, or we need to adjust this policy. And they look at it, and especially regressives, conservatives, they look at the power that they have, and they want to hold on to it because they've held it for 400 years with these policies. And when you hold on that power that long, they're going to continue to defend the institutions, the redlining, all the policies, the socioeconomic policies, until we start changing policies. Like Charlotte, for example, we passed the non-discrimination ordinance on August 9th. Well, that's not going to completely end homophobia and transphobia, the next day. Like all of a sudden, raise the sunshine is not going to hit the transphobic people on the butt and go, oh my gosh, all of a sudden I love queers. It's not going to happen that way, but you have to enact policies in a methodical way that strips down the institutions and the mechanisms that keep us from integrating our society and having a more equitable society. And then as citizens, we have to enforce it and go by it and acknowledge that it exists in many different ways. And I say all the time, there's always three responsibilities. There's governmental responsibility to pass laws and things of that nature. There's corporate responsibility, including churches, nonprofits, and all that, the employment sector. And then you have independent citizens, that also have to go by the rules. And as a society, we have to keep progressing to get to these Shangri-La ideas. And I think Angela Davis says it best: freedom is a constant struggle. And I think we're always going to have to keep fighting this fight, but it doesn't mean we should stop.
Jenny, I was thinking of something when Dr. B was talking, and also when Barbara was talking as well, because Barbara and I have a lot of similarities. We both grew up Catholic, and one of the things that I've noticed, because I didn't really understand what systemic racism meant, or even the word systemic, I'll be honest with you, until I moved to Charlotte. And there's so much systemic racism and policies and just overall. And one of the ways that once I was educated and learned about that, every time I see the Biltmore Hotel commercials for Christmas, I don't know if you guys see those, and it's the Biltmore Hotel. There was a time back then when we this, and yada, yada, yada. I have family members that say, oh, that's so great. That was a time. In my head, it's so systemic that they don't even realize, there was a time when Black people couldn't even go there, that there were actually servants and so forth. I know that's not what they say when they say, oh, remember the good old days, and I wish we had the back in the days. I don't want back in the 50s. I don't want the back. I mean, dude, I like the things when I was younger in the 70s and 80s and 90s. Yeah, but I want to move forward. I mean, I don't want to live in the time where I had to hide who I was. So anyway, every time I hear that Biltmore Hotel commercial, I always yell out, there was a time when people were slaves. I yell at the TV. So, anyway, I don't know.
Go ahead, Jen.
There's a huge difference between nostalgia and waxing poetically about the the big red bike that I got when I was 10 years old, or my Daisy Rider BB gun or whatever. But and
good point, Jen.
How horrific our history is.
And in terms of being an anti-racist, you can get sometimes a little extreme in all these Facebook things about, oh, who remembers all these silly things like you've just been mentioning, from the good old days. And if you point out to somebody just what you've been saying, that it wasn't good old days for everybody. Well, suddenly you're the bad guy, you're the stink in the room. But there's always that there. You don't hear many kind of descendants of slaves kind of saying, oh, the good old days.
They want to know when they're going to have the good old days.
Oh yeah, exactly. So when you see those memes coming around, that's one of the things that I've learned is in my journey to try to be an anti-racist, is to see those things for kind of, what's the subtle message, what else is being said there. And that applies to
Sure.
all sorts of things. Movies. Oh, good Lord. One of these other books I read talked about this movie that came out a number of years ago. What is it called? The Blind Side, about that kind of intellectually challenged big black football player who was an orphan or something, and this little white family took him in. And of course, all of white America thinks that's the most heartwarming, wonderful story. To a black person, it's like, get out of here. I mean, every single thing about that movie is wrong. You know, and I never thought that.
I thought it.
Well, probably so. But there are all sorts of things like that
Yeah.
you know, you look at and with a different set of eyes after reading a book like this, How to Be an Anti-Racist.
Barbara, did you want to say something? Then I have to do a plug for one of our shows.
I was just gonna.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to plug a show that we're going to have just to let you know. Next week, we're actually going to. Our topic is how Latinx veterans keep America great. Our Latinx community have fought in every American war, including the Civil War. Even Civil War, the Revolutionary War. They have fought in every war. They're the only ethnic group that has fought in every American war. And then the next week, we have a very special show. We'll have a very special guest. If anyone has seen the new Mark Wahlberg movie, Joe Bell, you can actually rent it on Redbox. It is a very touching story. And we will actually have the Joe's Walk for Change organization. That was the organization that the father, Joe Bell, had started, and he was walking across America, and he actually was killed on the side of when he was walking. And we'll have the group on our show in 2 weeks, and that is actually National Anti-Bullying Week. So it's appropriate to have that show. We'll have them. They'll be calling in with us from Utah. And also, I believe we'll also be talking about TDOR. You want to talk about that, Jenny? That will be
just real quick. That
Sure.
is November 20th of every year is Transgender Day of Remembrance.
Oh,
It's the
okay.
night that we acknowledge the hate crime murders of trans people specifically. And typically here, especially in this country, it is usually, you know, my sisters of color that are unmercifully murdered and slaughtered for no reason. And it's a heavy subject. It's, you know, and you know, anti-bullying is a huge thing with me, just because my community has such a high suicide rate. In fact, we have the highest of any, even higher than veterans. And so it's a very important topic to myself personally. And, you know, I hope one day we can see a future with a lot less bullying, a lot less intimidation and cruelty, because it's devastating. It's devastating in so many ways for the families and for the persons that commit suicide or are murdered. But yeah, I think, you know, one of the things that we run into when we're talking about racism, and something that white people have to be very careful about, is being that, air quote, that white savior, that white hero that we saw with, you know, the movie The Blind Side.
Sure.
Or be ambivalent towards, you know, racism in our movies, like the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie True Lies, for example, where every villain in the movie was a person of color magically, and how we had 3 white saviors saving the day from these people of color that were also terrorists and were going to blow up the United States with nuclear bombs. And so we run into 2 situations. It's either we're either painting people of color always as terrorists, murderers, rapists, you know, similar to what Trump fed into when he talked about new arrivals, Latinx new arrivals, and where they're all rapists, drug dealers, or murderers, and basically painting with a very broad brush. And I think our society has 2 battles to fight. One is to recognize the institutions of racism like
Sure.
mass incarceration, the fake war on drugs, things of that nature, and change those things and change policies to make them anti-racist and fix the institutions. And then the other thing is to change ourselves.
Sure.
Take a hard look. Am I really that accepting? Am I really not seeing things through a racist lens? Just as many of us have to deal with our own, phobias and deals, just like I have many friends that have learned not to be anti-trans or be uncomfortable with trans. Christian and I have gone on that journey. As close as we are in the same community, he has struggled at times with me being trans. Yeah, but it's been a learning experience. He's grown as a person. I've learned so much from being on this show and understanding the Latinx struggles and talking about it quite a bit and seeing the community, especially here in Charlotte, through his lens of eyes. And I've seen racism right in front of me where people have asked him in front of me, where are you from? And they're not looking at me. And I'm like, wow.
Like you're not there? Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, because he's Latinx, because Christian's a person of color, well, he can't be from here.
I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Only white people, like, they look at me and assume that I'm from here. And I'm like, I've only been here 3 years. And I'm only a second generation American, and Christian's family goes back to the 1700s or something like that. Like, I mean, they were making moonshine in the mountains of Arkansas or something, and so I think, but those kind of conversations, when we're talking about ethnicities of people, especially people of color, we shouldn't assume that they're not from here or they're not American. I think we have to deconstruct our idea of what an American looks like.
Yeah.
And when we get into these conversations of patriotism and loving our country, do we really love all of our neighbors?
Good point, Jenny. Yeah, I don't know how to follow that. That's I think this, like, conversations like this are very important, and one of the reasons I think it was important for us to have this conversation was not only because Dr. B has been very consistent on talking about this every time he's been on our show, and I appreciate that, Dr. B, because I know that you, not only your professional accomplishments, but the groups that you're involved in, the people that you can influence by talking about these. All of us, have groups that we can influence by having these conversations and talking. And there may be some people here, the Bless Your Heart group, that will say, well, Dr. B, it's okay with him. Maybe I need to, start talking about. I mean, I wanted to do my little impersonation there. So yeah, and Barbara as well. I appreciate Barbara always being on here and talking very honestly about how she grew up in Chicago, and Mama Ruth as well. We've all been able to. I hope we've all grown from the conversations that we've had on the show, this little community show. But yeah, I mean, I which is why it always, especially this critical race theory thing that's going on right now, and some of that is on the ballot, I guess, and that's why when Jenny had dropped that.
What was the name?
What was the question? Who's winning?
I have a question for Dr. B.
Sure.
I have not read Dr. Kendi's book, but what do you think, either according to the book or according to the research that you've done, Dr. B, what do you think is the most fundamental institution or institutions that we need to change to start divesting ourselves out of racism and the practices of racism? What do you think needs to change fundamentally as far as governmental institutions or governmental entities? Where do you think we should start?
I think Ibram Kendi would say all of them.
Well,
Because they all have
That's
this
a big number.
they all have this baked in. Okay, so start locally. Start at your church. Start at your job. Start at your Rotary Club. Kind of whatever. Look at ways. Kind of how whether it has policies that are racist, and maybe can you do some things within any group you're involved that are anti-racist. Start with your family, and boy, that's one of the toughest ones. Expect some blowback
Oh,
there.
yeah, I can attest to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know. We as individuals kind of can't take on the prison industrial complex and things like that, but you can talk about it. You can first of all learn about it. Listen, read the books, go watch the movies, read the webinars, and like I say, a lot of this is hard. Show yourself. Be present. Listen to people of color more than white people about how to solve racism, and offer to help in themes, but not to lead. Like I say, it's we have to solve the problem, but I think we don't tell Black people kind of how to solve the problem that is ours. But we should be there to kind of help them. And I think mainly just kind of constantly having this in your mind and thinking about it, so that therefore you will see things like we talked about in different lights. And then feel free to kind of call out things, write letters to the editor about why North Carolina isn't expanding Medicaid. And everybody talks about, what's his name, Moore and Berger, about, it's just bad policy and it's going to cost you. Nobody so far has said it's racist. The only, most of the states that have expanded Medicaid are in the South. Surprise. It's racism. And you alluded to this misrepresentation of this critical race theory. Learn what critical race theory really is and call it out when you hear people talking about, they're good at in the school.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I looked it up. I wasn't exactly sure what they were talking about. I'm like, oh my God.
I guarantee you, none of the conservatives know what they're talking about.
No,
they have totally confused and deliberately conflated this as a big bugaboo. It's kind of like the welfare queens and stuff like that. They're trying to use it as a big scare tactic.
But the big thing is, Dr. B, all these parents, and then you've got the Democrats saying we don't teach it in Virginia. And then you see like this deer in the headlights look on their face. And they're like, do you know what it is? And then they walk away mad.
Yeah, right.
So,
well, I mean, Jenny and I have these conversations all the time, and I know we're preaching to the choir on this show. I mean, there are people who watch this show that don't agree with us, but I never understood why people thinking.
You're breaking up.
I don't want my kids to think.
are we losing Christian here?
Sorry about that.
No,
we missed what you just said. It may be good on the recording.
I said I never, Jenny and I have these conversations, but I never understood why parents would be against their kids thinking. I mean, it's like,
well, because
I don't want my
they're kids.
Think.
Well, what was it? I saw a great thing today. It says parents don't want, or grandparents don't want their grandkids to learn about how they were racist and didn't let the little kids come to school. And they were standing there with all these signs, So that's what they're trying to hide is their own, terrible kind of past.
But what to me is very bizarre, besides doing a deep dive on the critical race theory, the fact that one, it's a college level and an intellectual
law school
level.
It's a law school level.
Anything that we should be talking about in grade schools or even high school.
They're not.
What?
It's very bizarre, Chris. I mean, the regressives have made they make a good selling point when they want to light people's hair on fire right before an election. They've done a good job in Virginia, just like they did a good job in 2016 of scaring the crap out of people that about Hillary. It's a constant battle of a tremendous amount of lying on the regressive side that again, they keep trying to pull down these discussions and go, well, you want to make America great again. What you're really saying is you want to keep it white dominant, and you want to make it 1955 again. Is what you wanted to make it.
Make sure they stay in power is what they want, which is not what they were elected for.
And in reality, and I do believe why there is such a huge fear is it has to be talked about that, in less than a decade and probably sooner, white people will be the largest minority.
Right.
That we're- that-
2026.
that our role is going to shift physically, like
Yeah.
whether and there's no way of putting the air brake on it. Like we're not going to go down this.
We can't have enough
population
babies
highway
to make up for it.
and throw the e-brake on and switch this unless some people really put on some Barry White, get some massage oils and get busy. And it's still going to take a generation before, because
Not for voting time.
white families in general in the last few generations have had smaller and smaller families, and the reality is that we are as a people, if you want to call it air quotes, we're just shrinking compared to our counterparts of color, and it's just reality, and they see the handwriting on the walls, and I think Obama's election, obviously in 2008, scared them, and
But
so
geez,
it really revealed a lot about who white America really is, in my opinion. And I don't know if Dr. Kendi talks about that at all. I know Angela Davis does. She talked about it a lot in her book that I read this summer about Ferguson, comparing it to South Africa and apartheid, and comparing it to the Palestinian struggle in the Middle East, and how similar they are, just as comparable to the LGBT struggle here in the United States. And they all have a constant threat, is that they're all being controlled by large governmental entities such as private prisons, detention centers, economic influence, and redlining or segregation in some way. And those are the institutions we have to go after, locally, statewide, and nationally.
Sure, we only have about 9 minutes left, but I just want to say that I think we all, sometimes it seems very overwhelming. We're chipping away. And Jenny and I have had this conversation. I never thought in my lifetime that I would ever see marriage equality. That was not something that I ever even dreamed of that would happen.
Really?
Yeah, never thought. I didn't think that would. I thought it was, yeah, right. So I do think that there are things that we are going to be seeing, and I hope I would love to live long enough to see a person of color elected governor of North Carolina and of Texas, my home state. I would love to see these little bitty things, so that way, because I know when young people see, if you don't see yourself, you don't think you're important. And that's one of the reasons that we are going to have the show in December about PBS.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yes, it's going to be our part 2 show, is PBS, the last all-white media. Once again, remember we had the part 1 show and PBS didn't show up for that show, and we'll be talking about it again. And I challenge everyone to just watch 4 hours of any of the 4 PBS stations during the day, and you to determine whether it's an all-white. The only time it gets more diverse is in the evenings when they're talking about us, whether it's
Sesame Street.
That's true. That's right. Yeah. Well, and Rootle, what's that? Rootle, ROOTLE. They have 4 stations, the 4 digital stations. And so anyway, with that, but I do think we can all make a difference, because I've been talking about PBS all year long, and finally, my other half was watching PBS, and they were doing some, not Downton Abbey, but some history of the Queen or whatever. And my other half yelled at the TV and said, "Why is there always history about Great Britain? Why don't we ever have history about America or about people of color?" Only like 8% of Americans are actually from Britain, but yet almost all of PBS is about Britain. And so I was like, I made a dent in this household. So anyway, I thought I'd say that. We probably should wrap up because I'm out of things to say about it. I know we have a lot to talk. Does anybody else want to add anything before we start to wrap up the show?
Let me say one more thing about
Sure.
if you decide that you want to be an anti-racist and take this on, one of the biggest fears is, oh, I'm going to mess up. I'm going to say the wrong thing to a black person or something. And yeah, that's going to happen. But you know, the alternative is to continue to be quietly and complicitly a racist. And so it's a small price to pay. And I've actually found it very kind of exhilarating and liberating to kind of be, I hope, more open and on a path to really make a difference in my teeny tiny way. So just try not to be fearful. The good of the world is with you.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
The new group of people that I met in Charlotte from being on Tira's campaign, many of them were Black, and I have to admit, I really, when I'm in a corporate wise, I had no problem, but now that I'm not, I don't try to divest myself of corporate and be the real me, and intimidated sometimes because I really didn't know what to say in certain settings because I was totally out of my element. And I always revert to listening. And then when I can ask a question about something that I really don't know anything about and say, I don't know anything about that. Can you tell me about it? You know, and but sometimes people think you're phony, but I'm not kidding because there's things I really don't know about and I really want to know. So
Sure.
it's hard.
There is.
Hey, Jen, you want to say something before we wrap up?
Well, I think depending on the setting, I think when you're in a setting, let's say we're in a political caucus that's like a Black political caucus or a Latinx political caucus, for example. In those situations, I think it's incumbent upon the say it's the Democratic Party, for example, as a white Democrat, it's incumbent upon me to step back and not play the air quote white savior. Is that I am there to be the fly on the wall, to learn as much as I can, to interact, but in no way, shape, or form should I be leading in those situations. And in any type of situation that is either Black centric or brown centric, white people should always climb into the back seat automatically. They shouldn't have to be told. And that's how you become anti-racist, is when you defer without being asked and say, no, thank you for letting me speak, but I'm going to defer to y'all. And I think many of us that are, you know, for one, I love to talk, and two, you know, I have to be aware of my privilege and you know, and I've been in settings where they say, well, Jenny, why are you so quiet? And I'm like, because I'm here to lesson and learn and grow, and it's not my place. And I think many white people need to learn from that, because it was very successful in Georgia, and we took a back seat.
That's right.
We had a Black-led campaigns for both of those senatorial campaigns, and they made history.
Yep, that's true. That's true. With that, I think I want to thank everyone for joining us. We do value your time. I do want to just do one more plug. After this show, about 15 minutes after the show, there will be another edition of Two Queers in a Truck. Jenny-Jaymes Gunn and Lady Bless Your Heart will be on that show talking about probably the election. I don't know what they'll be talking about. It's me. So in case you didn't get that, but this is what I think. I think we should just treat everyone, regardless, with respect and dignity. And we can, and if you just do that, then we will always err on the side of, you know, I mean, just, you know.
The funny thing is, isn't that the old golden rule, which has been kind of a tenet of almost every single civilization going way back before Jesus? And if only, that's all we have to do, but we haven't really kind of figured it out yet.
Yeah.
Well, the nuts kind of beat it into us, so you know.
But
Or throw chalk at you, whatever it is.
unfortunately, many of the regressives, they have a different golden rule. He who has the gold
It's-
makes the rules.
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
Yeah,
And therein lies our issue.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's true.
Money and
Well,
power.
once again, thank you so much for joining us. Next week, we'll be talking about how Latinx veterans have kept America great. And then the week after, we will have the show about the Joe's Walk for Change. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about the Joe Bell, the Mark Wahlberg story, and anti-bullying and the Transgender Day of Remembrance as well. So I'm Christian Kyle. Let's go around the Brady Bunch screen in 30 seconds or less because we only have about 1 minute. Please tell us where you're going to be in 30 seconds or less. Who wants to start that one?
I'll go off first.
Okay.
This Friday, the Charlotte Pride has our annual film festival. It is going to be outdoors. It is going to be in person, and we're going to have a double. We're going to have a double feature. You can go on our Facebook, our Twitter, our website, or any of the places that Charlotte Pride hangs out at, and get more information, ticket information, and how you can reserve your seat tonight. So I would appreciate it. Everybody's welcome. You don't have to be queer to come to our film festival. So love to see you there.
And bring our Snuggies. It's going to be cooler. Yeah. I
Wanna go
will be
next, Barb?
here locally. I'm working on a couple of, I think it's called like family rummage sales or whatever. And boy, do I have rummage because I'm a professional organizer and everybody's starting to make room for all the Christmas stuff. And, it's fall, whatever. So that's what I'm going to be doing.
I'm going to still be out here in Western Colorado. We're going to be out here till after Thanksgiving, getting cooler by the day, and still doing what I can to support Black Lives Matter and Medicare for All. Love writing letters to the editors all over the place, and practicing my banjo, which is my new little interest here. So
We
there
gotta
you
have,
go.
we gotta have him play.
Oh, we can have a jam one of these days.
Oh, that'd be good. Yay.
I am impressed. I want to learn the accordion.
Don't be.
Yeah. So, all right.
It's banjo.
Yes.
That's fun.
That's a great. Anyway, I also forgot to tell you that Charlotte City Council person Matt Newton will be on our show next week. We'll be talking about his run now for district court judge, but also just the things about the city as well. And I will be here. My camping and boating season has ended, and until next March. So it is great to be back home, and I am so excited that I'm going to Texas in a couple of weeks, back to Texas. So if anybody needs me to buy brisket and bring it back, brisket is only $3.61 a pound. In Texas, it's $9.99 a pound. Here, yes.
Ouch.
Yeah.
That's one reason to go vegan.
Yeah, Art doesn't eat meat anymore, so I don't
Yeah,
eat.
that's right. All right. All right.
Cholesterol's
We'll see. With that, thank you very much. We'll see you. Please stay on Zoom,
Night.
and then we'll make the promo.
Good
Bye,
night.
y'all. See you next week.